came to this conclusion, this is ridiculous. You're going to have to take best of both, and that's how you're going to have to sort of map your life out if you want to be happy. And my sisters have all had arranged marriages. I mean, they got married young, 16 and that, and so once I had made that decision, and like in my teens that I was going to do this, it just sort of gave me this ownership of my own identity. And I didn't get married till I was 30, and I didn't marry an Indian man either. And that was a bit of a shock for the family. Well, for my mom, because there was this that she expected me to be sort of married within not just the Indian culture, but in the caste system, because we have caste systems, and we're Brahmins, and we're the highest, and so if you even marry outside of your own caste, that's like, whoa. But some of my family members put it, to marry a white guy, whoa, what are you thinking? But I think that very early on I knew that if I wanted to be happy, I knew what was good in my own culture, and I knew what was good from the Western, and that's how I was going to have to live my life, and that's what I chose. And funnily enough, my mom, my husband is her favorite son-in-law. Because she tells me, he's not so demanding like those Indian son-in-laws. It's just, so it just sort of changes as years go on.
I think it's similar in my experience. So I had a very traditional Filipino family, and youngest. I think we're all youngest then, right? And I don't know if this is true about youngest, but I think there's a certain level of freedom you can have to explore your identity and to kind of do things that are not traditional, compared to my brother who has a computer science degree, my sister who's a nurse, right? Like, wow, great, we know what that is. And when I told my parents, anthropology, linguistic, what is that, right? And even though I went further in school, up to the PhD level, they still to this day don't know what it is that I do. They think I went as far as a master's, because master actually, it means you've mastered something. Like the doctorate, doesn't mean anything. And I was largely raised, so even though, I have my parents, they're still alive, they actually left me in the care of my grandmother. So when I was born, my parents always held 2 jobs. So when they were done with their 9 to 5, there was always an evening shift, a graveyard shift, or a weekend shift. They always had a second job. So I was largely raised by my grandmother, who never had any formal education. So she couldn't read or write. So to imagine having this granddaughter who loved to read books, right, wanted to go to the library all the time, and she couldn't read, she couldn't sign her name, right? Her name was like an X, basically. And we worked so hard on trying to get her to learn English, and she never did. There's a certain distance that you have with family if you go to this other path. I wasn't a computer scientist, I wasn't into biology. I liked watching European movies. I liked, reading British novels, and that was so foreign to my parents. In high school, I had won a scholarship to go to Germany, and they didn't know what that was going to be. Why do you want to go away from us, right? And that was really hard. The idea of kind of becoming somebody interested in the liberal arts, right? Somebody who wasn't taking that very orthodox path of the immigrant way of life was really foreign, is still very foreign to my family. So when I go home with them, we watch Wheel of Fortune, we talk about the weather. That's kind of as far as it goes, and I've always felt a kind of, jealousy of kids who can go to their parents and talk about, I'm working on this chapter of my dissertation, or, I'm working on this grant to do, my parents wouldn't know what that means. And so there is that kind of distance that I've had to accept, which is sad, it's kind of a reality that I've had to accept. Any other questions from the audience?
kind of has what you just said about like your parents not knowing what like, you know, what it means to have a PhD. Like my mom is the same thing. Like she believed that as soon as you got your bachelor's degree, like we got our bachelor's degree, that meant that we would be able to help her economically. And sadly that doesn't happen to like people like us, because you got loans that you gotta pay off, especially if you go to in-state schools, it's way more expensive. And I mean, like my mom to this day, like she, like my sister, my second oldest sister, who's the one who's gonna be going to grad school, she tells me, yeah, mom comes in here and she just doesn't get it yet. She thinks, you know, I just kind of waste my time, because she's a English, rhetoric, and similar like WGST, double major from college. So my mom didn't understand that, because my older sister majored in biochemistry with a double minor in mathematics and psychology. And then there was me. I was doing photography. And I mean, she's like I always remember my sister telling me, she's like, yeah, mom doesn't see like, my mom didn't see potential in me until I came to college. She would always tell my sister, why is she wasting her money on that film? Like, you know, like she could be using that money to help me, you know, pay for the bills or something. And I mean, she honestly didn't see potential. She's like photography, like what is that? And I mean, and then yeah, until I came to college, she says, you know, oh wow, like these are very beautiful pictures or whatever. And then I was like, yeah, mom, like it's not just, you know, being a photographer, taking photo of a plant, like, you know, I want to do something with it. I want to use that as a vehicle for something else. You know, I think stories like these and like my family's, I think those are important to hear. And through photography, I think that becomes a powerful tool. And I mean, my older sister, like, sadly, she hasn't been able to go to med school, but I mean, she has like gained the responsibility as a mother as well, like my mother did. Like she raised us, and I mean, she wanted to be a coroner, you know, open dead bodies, and you know, the opposite of what my mom did, because she was a nurse. But my mom was so happy. She's like, yes, you're gonna be going to medical school and stuff like that. And then there was me and my middle sister and me, and then she's like, what are you guys doing? What are you doing for life? And it's like, all right, I guess. Not doing anything.
One thing that I did do last summer when I was in England that I felt that was really, really important was I wanted to show my daughter the refugee camp. And I have been going back to England, back and forth for many years. And for some reason I just was not ready, you know, but last year I was ready. And I think it was probably because my 13-year-old was with me, and I really felt that it was important for her to see the first point of my home in the United Kingdom when I first arrived, you know, from Africa, and what it was like. Because she's heard me talk, she asks me questions, and I remember telling her that, you know, when we arrived, I mean, you come from a hot climate, and we arrived in the United Kingdom, and it's freezing. I mean, it is so cold. My toes were freezing, and I was feeling these tingling sensations, but I didn't know what it was, because I was little, and I remember crying and saying to my mom, please, Mom, I promise I'm going to be good. Let's just go back. This cannot be right. This is where you go when you die. Really, because it was cold and didn't feel right. And then when we were taken to the Air Force Base, where, you know, we were all placed, we were in these cubicles with cots, and there was no heating, and there were these old aerodrome buildings, the old from like the World Wars, you know, the green ones and that. And so that image and that vision and everything had stayed with me. And so she heard this. But so last summer, we went to Hemswell, where the camp was. Well, you know, we got there, and it looked familiar, but looked very different. And my husband said, are you sure this is it? And I said, I know that building there, but the rest of it doesn't look familiar. Well, what has happened was the whole area has been converted into the largest antiques area in Europe, right? But what happened was we had entered in from the back end of the base. So I'm trying to explain to her, and there's this sense of sadness that's sort of welling up inside of me, because I'm like, I wanted to show it to her exactly the way I saw it, you know? And I know that it's not possible, but there was a big part of me hoping that it would be the way it was, so she would believe my story, if that makes sense. And so, you know, I was looking around, and this guy came out, and he looked just like a British major, you know, and he asked me a question, and I said, you know, I thought this was Henswell Air Force Base Camp, and he said, it is. I said, but it doesn't look as familiar as I thought it would, because I remember we were in Hannah Block, and then there was C Block, and he said, you've got the right place. He said, I'm the historian for this place. I couldn't believe it. So he said, you're in the back end of it. So he took us to the front end, and then that was it. It just looked completely familiar. And there I was standing with my daughter, able.
It's very powerful. I wanted to, one of the questions also I sort of asked you too is to think about moments. This is often the experience with immigrants, whatever generation, but do you remember moments or experiences in your life where somehow you were either told or somehow you had the feeling that your experience was not normal or not typical? Your life was not normal or typical. Because, you know, the irony of it is that the immigrant experience is the norm of this country, but yet somehow our discourse is always about normalizing a very particular way of life, a very particular set of identities. So, yeah, growing up, do you ever remember like times when you just were told or made to feel like, no, this is not?
There's a very specific memory I have. So I don't remember a lot from my childhood, not in Serbia, not so much when I grew up and I started living in the United States, but there was this one moment. And, you know, I realized I was in a different place. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the language for a long time. But when I was in kindergarten, so I'm telling you, little 5-year-old me with a heavy accent, no one wanted to talk to me, no one wanted to be my friend, no one could say my name. Like, it was just all a little depressing at first. But I come home and I tell my mom, like, I'm crying. No one wants to be my friend, no one's talking to me, like, even the teachers don't know how to approach me because I don't know English. And my mom's like, don't worry, you're just as good as all the other kids. And I'm like, I didn't think I was worse than them, what? I thought they were the ones with the problem, you know? And so it had never occurred to me to be like, I'm the one with the problem, it's my life that's messed up somehow, that I need to change it. So I think that was probably the big one for me, and that stuck with me. I'll tell you, 14 years later, I can still remember that.
And it's coming from home, right? Not,
Yeah. Not so much, I mean, I knew, like, yeah, logically I was like, I don't know anyone, who are all these people, no one knows me, but like, I was never made to feel, like it had never occurred to me as a 5-year-old that like, that I was different from other children. I was so different that like, it would make a difference. And we're all kids, you know, like, all kids are the same, you can't have that many differences, but it just made me feel this sort of kind of inequality or like disability or something, like something was wrong, some sort of deficiency.
almost like a secondary status, something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, also school age, one of the things that struck me is that my experience wasn't typical was little assignments that the teachers would give for homework that I don't think people realize. Some of these assignments called for materials that would not be part of an immigrant family's life. So I remember growing up in California, we had to make a seismograph, you know, the things that measure earthquakes. So one of the materials we had to used was an oatmeal canister, like Quaker Oats, like they come in these. And like, my family's like, what's oatmeal? and things like Elmer's glue, right? And so I remember like my parents, you know, the shame I also would feel when my parents said, well, we don't have Elmer's glue, but we have rice, and they would like make it into a paste, right? Like mixing rice with water, and I had to use that as glue, and there was this huge sense of shame, like, we don't even have Elmer's glue. I mean, that was a big thing for me. Like, you're 5 years old, like, your world is falling apart. You don't have Elmer's glue, and you don't know what, you know, oatmeal is. But, you know, that's kind of the interesting thing. There's, like, these normalizing processes in school systems or in just what we might think are just very harmless kinds of activities when there's a lot of assumptions about what a household should have. Like, that's very easy to come by. So I remember my parents buying oatmeal because they needed, and they would just dump the canister. And my mother, like for months, trying to figure out what to do with this oatmeal. She was like, you know, this costs